Right. Welcome everyone to the first ever QD. Am I pronouncing this correctly?
Yeah, that'll do. QD.
Perfect. Developer meeting. Welcome. I thought maybe we'll just start with a quick round of introduction, just what your interest in QD is and maybe something you'd like to see it do in the future.
Shall I go first?
Sure.
So my name's Adam Harrison. You've probably seen on the Kured GitHub repository that I'm the author of Kured. I think in the agenda, Daniel, you wanted me to give a quick kind of recap of the history. May as well just do that now. So at Weaveworks, we operate a couple of Kubernetes clusters. We have done for quite a long time, kind of 3.5, 4 years now, since very early versions of Kubernetes, like 1.2, I think. And we run those on about 15, 20 nodes. And at the time we made those Kubernetes installations, there was no, we kind of predated things like GKE and EKS by a couple of years. So there was no managed Kubernetes service that we could use. So it's all done the hard way on Ubuntu, on EC2. So we just use Terraform to spin up the machines, the thin Ansible shim to install Kubernetes, and then application stuff is installed via Flux onto Kubernetes. So part of the operating system setup is we install unattended upgrades on those machines. And I think the first time we noticed that there was a problem with machines needed to be rebooted is that the disks were filling up on machines, because essentially we had a whole accumulation of like kernel modules and packages and things on there. They have a very small kind of root partition, and that was the first alert that ever tripped. And when we diagnosed that and figured out what was happening, we thought, okay, we need to be a bit more proactive about actually rebooting the machine. So the first thing we did was just put a simple alert on there that detected the presence of the reboot required file. And we survived like that for quite a long time. Essentially, if that file existed for longer than a certain amount of time, we would get an alert, and then whoever was on call would go in and reboot the machines manually. And that reboot process was done in a kind of careful way. We would, check to make sure that, obviously if there's an incident ongoing, we don't do anything. Check to make sure there's no extant alerts, and then just do a kind of progressive, careful reboot of the cluster and monitor things to make sure everything's okay. Yeah, we survived like that for a while, but it started to become apparent that actually it's quite frequent, these kind of kernel patches coming out, or modules, or glibc updates, or whatever it is that requires a machine to be rebooted. There's actually an ex-colleague of mine, Tom Wilkie, that suggested creating a daemon to do this. And he wrote out a few bullet points of basically what it should do, and I was the one that picked that up and ran with it in my spare time, and developed the kind of cluster locking stuff on top of the API server. And we've been using Kured in production, since then, a couple of years at least. There's a blog post on our website a couple of years ago where we open sourced it and publicized it. So yeah, that's kind of that's the brief history of Kured. From our perspective, it's kind of it's feature complete for what we need, right? And that's kind of why I've personally not been as involved with the development of it, and not being very proactive about reviewing PRs, because it's kind of done and dusted from our point of view of our use cases. So one of the things I would like to see is kind of, it's clear that other people are interested in it and they've got other things and features that they want. I would like to see, some other people helping to maintain it and take it forward.
Super. Thanks a lot, Adam.
I think it would be just the right time where I can talk about my, I would say, my case, because it just flows with what was just said. So my name is Jean-Philippe. Because my first name is super hard to pronounce for English native speaker, you can call me JP. I'm a senior engineer at SUSE. I joined our Kubernetes team recently after a long period dealing with OpenStack. SUSE is shipping QD in its Kubernetes product. So we need folks to be actively looking after what's going inside that product. And so we need people to be caring about Kured or Kured, whatever the name is, as we said. And so we need to ensure the Kured community healthiness and just be able to contribute. So for what I would like to see in Kured or in Kured, it's two things. Basically, well, aiming for 0 issues and 0 pending PRs. Because that makes my life easier, and I would say introduce a few things that we are doing at SUSE, and that's part of our packaging, or basically extra patches that we carry that we shouldn't need to carry because we can just contribute to Kured. And so, for example, one common way to deal with notifications. And so I'm not yet familiar with Kured code, but I will be ramping up my knowledge on it part-time in the future. And so that basically is the connection with what was previously said, is to help on maintaining this.
I can jump in and briefly go next. So I'm Craig Peters. I'm the Azure team, and I work closely with Rita and Ace, who are also on this call. I'm interested in seeing how we can standardize the way in which we manage kernel patches and associated restarts across multiple projects. So we have kind of a set of users that use Azure to run Kubernetes themselves using various tools, from KubeSpray to one we maintain called AKS Engine to Cluster API. And then we also have a set of products and managed services, AKS, which Ace works on, and others. Ace also contributes to Cluster API, by the way. But I'd just like to see how we can standardize the way which we do this to make life easier for our users. And Kured seems like a reasonable approach to that.
I think I'll sneak in. So yeah, I'm Ace. I was previously on a team that was using Kured in production, and we had some interest in additional features like the scheduling, not rebooting over weekends and stuff like that. So that was kind of our niche. And yeah, like Craig said, I think there's an obvious use case here, and if people aren't maintaining Kured, there will be a solution required either way. So I think we already have a good solution, and I'd just kind of like to see it carried forward, right? I don't think there's anything specific in terms of features that is, I'd call out, but.
Hey, I'm Rita. I'm just echoing what Craig and Nick said. Also here to learn more and see how we can add new features. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm Daniel Herbach. I'm a community manager at Weaveworks, and I mostly work with all our open source projects and make sure they have everything they need and take care of logistics. Which is why just a few weeks ago I realized there were a couple of PRs that we could land and we could get a new release out. Like, people really wanted the new release. I think one of you worked on this one PR that had, like, I don't know, 20 comments of people who wanted it in. So I'm glad that landed and it's out there. Yeah, I'm just looking at the agenda doc, what should still have in mind. So is there anything right now that you would need to see landed in a next release, or anything we should take a look at? Or I know that Jean-Philippe went through, like, basically all of the open issues and PRs, and saw which one still made sense, and where we might want a generalized solution for a couple of things people were asking for. anything you would like to see soon?
There is nothing that is urgently needed on my side, but what I can see, I would say, coming next would be ensuring that our code works with the latest Kubernetes version, or updating the client Go, at least because 1.18 is going to be very soon out. I created an issue just today just to make sure that we track this, but nothing urgent. The rest is just improvements that we can do over time.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
I was just going to ask a question because there's a lot I don't know. Unfortunately, I haven't done enough research ahead of time. But does Kured have regular builds and tests?
No, it doesn't. So yeah, that would be something that would be very useful for someone to contribute. Would be some form of integration testing. So the way that I have done it in the past when I was kind of actively looking after it is, and particularly because at Weaveworks we keep up with Kubernetes releases in a pretty timely fashion. So kind of every 3 months we're deploying a new Kubernetes release. So when that was happening, I was being more proactive about, or rather when I was managing the SRE for that, I was being a bit more proactive about keeping Kured up to date. And the way that I was doing that is I would create a branch. I would update the client Go, put a new kubectl version in, do a build of that on a branch, and then I would do some local testing with Minikube on kind of the previous version, the current version, and then it would get deployed to our dev cluster that runs Weave Cloud, and we would do some test reboots on that, and then if that worked okay, that branch would get merged, and then I would do a release. So it's kind of difficult because there's the question is like, is it worth doing kind of automating that testing, and particularly the compatibility matrix testing? It's quite a lot. It's probably going to be quite a lot of effort to do that. I don't know how other people feel about it, but conversely, we only need to do that once every 3 months. So it's one of those kind of, there's the XKCD picture with like how many times you do something versus how much effort it's worth to automate it. So I'm not sure how other people feel about that. One thing that I would probably like to see is an integration test for the locking code, because I tested that at the time that it was written, but it would be good to revalidate that every time there's a new kind of perhaps validate it with new versions of etcd and the API server, because it uses the optimistic locking kind of update mechanism in the API server, and it would be nice to validate that works correctly, because that's really the key thing that could go wrong, I think, if that could potentially cause an outage in people's clusters if all of the machines were to reboot at the same time due to a failure of that lock. So I think that's, if we're going to do any form of improved testing, that would be a place to focus on first.
Yeah, in the last weeks, especially when I tried to make this first release of QD on my own, I talked to Adam and I noted down the steps in this document. I also linked it in the meeting notes, which is basically like a short description of how we tested things, and I was able to test it in our dev environment as well. I don't know if like how much work it would be to do some end-to-end testing of this. Like if we could maybe steal some of what we have for Flux or the Helm operator, and I just don't know. I don't have much experience with this. Does any one of you have more experience there, or?
I was going to ask Ace what his team was doing, where he was using it in prod.
Yeah, so we actually had our own pipeline. So I was going to say this is something that maybe I can help out with, at least in terms of just build automation. But I mean, in terms of testing and things I would want to see, I mean, the code base is pretty small. I am, not familiar with all of it, but like I've been through it a few times. I've contributed to it. So I think actually just looking at the open issues, the biggest thing that calls out to me is maybe some best practices documentation. So Craig, especially maybe for AKS users, it seems like there are some questions about how do you manage this when you have a lot of nodes and interesting situations. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like logically a way to deal with that would be to codify them in an add-on.
Yep.
And so from our perspective, it'd be really cool to build a AKS engine add-on and have some testing around that, because that would certainly accomplish some of the validation testing on Azure, and then that add-on could be potentially useful for AKS users. And from a sort of project perspective, that would probably highlight some places where there could be minor improvements. I don't know what those might be at this point, though. I have no idea how much effort an add-on would be for AKS Engine. Do you have any sense of that, Ace?
I think it will probably be, yeah.
Sorry, Rita.
Yeah, it wouldn't be small.
Okay.
But definitely something we can look into maybe next, like in a couple months, or.
Yeah, we just have to measure what our user demand is for that.
Does anyone care about non-x86 builds? Because there was someone filed a PR a while ago to do ARM builds. I think, is that something people care about?
In the from the Azure side of the house, we've got the wrong people to ask that question. We could inquire internally about from our IoT friends. It's possible they have interest there. I can make some inquiries.
At least for AKS, though, I think no, right? Or like AKS/engine.
Say that again, Ace. Sorry.
At least for AKS/engine, I think no, but there might be like other use cases.
Exactly. I can advertise this meeting to that community.
Yeah, it seems like the only other thing that I see kind of coming out a lot is integrations, like Alert Manager and stuff. But I thought there were integrations already, so maybe I'll take a look at some of those issues. It seems like no one has anything like crazy pressing, but we're all kind of on the same page, which is good, at least.
Yeah, I think it's just it just needs I think mainly the thing it needs is like keeping up to date with Kubernetes versions, doing a regular release, making sure it's tested. And the work I'm doing at the moment, I'm not doing that anymore because I'm working on something else effectively. So if we can get help doing those kind of things.
I was going to ask about that. What's the cadence for upkeeping with Kubernetes versions?
Well, ideally it should be whenever new ones come out, and in practice, and certainly recently, I've effectively stopped doing it. And it's relatively straightforward to do. It's bump the kubectl version, update client go. The bulk of the work is just testing it on a bunch of different Kubernetes versions, which you can largely do with Minikube. And it's handy to have a proper cluster to do it on as well. But one of the things I've never been able to do is I could have, but didn't have time for, was testing on other platforms like Azure, because we're running on AWS, so we just test it on that, and then it was good enough for us, and that would be it. So if the kind of the status of the project has been it was an internal tool that we produced, and it's been kind of incidentally open sourced, and now we're trying to transition it to more of a kind of like proper community thing, so that it's better supported.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a piece of work that might be interesting to do, which is one of our other engineers, Ilya, broke out kubectl the drain code so that it could be used as a library. And the only reason we bundle kubectl inside Kured is to run drain, because the drain implementation is I mean, it's relatively straightforward, but it has a bunch of kind of casing in there, depending on which version of Kubernetes it's talking to, depending on whether, like, is it a version of Kubernetes that supports the evictions API and things like this. And Ilya, for a different reason, pulled that piece of code out. I think it was for free KS control. And it would be nice for us to use that instead of bunging kubectl, because it will drastically reduce the size of the container for a start, because most of the size of the container is the kubectl binary. And it just make just make doing the regular Kubernetes updates a little bit easier, because you just have one thing to update then instead of two. And that's probably like a really kind of simple self-contained thing that anyone could contribute. So I think there is an issue for that, and maybe we should mark that as like a help wanted kind of thing.
I was just about to say, I'm going to open an issue for that if there's not one already.
Yeah, check, because I think there might be. But yeah, please do if there isn't.
Cool. Anything else on anyone's list? Excellent. Yeah, I'm wondering, should we just announce this as a one-off meeting for now, but I think for now it would make sense to make this, like, I don't know, every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks or something, especially as the group gets to know each other and starts working on a new release. What is everyone's gut feeling on this? Is the time generally right for everyone? This work?
This time is fine. I think for the type of project this is, monthly is probably a good cadence from my perspective. But as you heard from Rita, we've got like a bunch of backed up priorities. This doesn't jump to the top, unfortunately, of what we're working on right now. But there's definitely interest.
Anyone else? Or
That works for me. Monthly meeting. It's good enough.
Is there a Slack channel or some?
yes. So on the Weave Slack, if you go to, what is it, slack.weave.works, you can invite yourself to it. And then it's the QD channel.
Got it. Thank you.
Sweet. I'll set up a monthly meeting then. And I think on Slack, we can just get together and start planning the next release. I'll just set up a milestone and we can lump all the issues and PRs there.
I like that you added the Slack channel stuff. Sorry.
Oh, yes. Sweet.
Speaking of getting help.
Sweet. So should we just coordinate the next release there and then just see how much time we have to figure out, I don't know, the automated testing or Ace, I think you mentioned some, what was it?
Build pipeline or something. Yeah.
Yes, or documenting the best practices. We just start talking about it and then figure out what makes the cut.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Yeah, sweet. I mean, we can do once 1.18 is out, we can do a release with that and then probably do a new release with like the crazier ideas further down the line.
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. Any more questions from anyone? Anything we would need as a team?
I appreciate the opportunity to help get started.
Yeah, I saw it like QD turning up in the Azure documentation quite a bit. Do you have any feedback from people using it, or just worked for them and you never hear back from them? I was surprised to see this.
I hope it's the latter. I haven't gotten any direct feedback about it yet.
As a user, I think it is the latter. I think people just use it and it works.
Great, great. Yeah, one thing we could also do, I noticed, does any one of you use the Helm chart for QD? No, because I noticed that they had put quite a, like exposed a bunch of options or added their own, not secret, but source to it. Maybe it would help to reach out to the maintainers of the chart and invite them here the next time.
Yeah, I didn't know there was one. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah. All right, I'll take care of that then. Yeah, it's not everyone, and see you on Slack, I guess.
Next time.
Cool. Thanks very much, folks. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.